The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. It's good to be back in studio. It's been a hectic kind of, really like 3 weeks, right? I mean, we had the vacation. Right. I was in one day, then I was out at the conference, etc. But now we're back.
Yeah, I think in the past 3 weeks or so, you've maybe made it to the studio a couple days, just a handful.
Yeah.
That's pretty insane.
Yes, it is insane. That's exactly the word I was thinking. We have a lot to discuss today. Number one, most of us intuitively, if you've been following the student loan debacle of the last, who knows how many years at this point, you probably intuitively have a sense that loans have been made that were sort of designed to fail. They were never really, it was never really thought that they would be paid back. But we're learning even more and more about this. There's a New York Times article talking about a lender, SLM Corporation, maybe known to you as Sallie Mae. And government lawyers are saying that Sallie Mae deliberately made loans, as well as Navient, which was sort of a spin-off of Sallie Mae, that were incredibly aggressive, very sloppy in their due diligence, and that were never really going to be paid back. And there's sort of two sides to this story, Pat. We've talked before about whether you should even be able to get who knows what amount of dollars in loans if you are going into a field that is unlikely to pay very well. And it's not sort of an insult to the field or to the merits of the field. It's sort of a reaction to the reality that you're making a loan that someone may never be able to pay back. Separately from that, there's the question of whether lenders, in doing due diligence, could somehow come up with a way to say, hey, we're going to make these loans when any reasonable person would realize that these are bigger loans than anybody would be able to pay back.
Right, and this article focuses in on a story of a woman by the name of Ashley Hardin.
Yep.
And she wanted to become a photographer, went to one of the best schools for that track, I think in the West Coast is how they marketed it. And it turned out she wasn't even able to get a job in the field, or years later, after pursuing that degree, she ended up working as a waitress, and now she's paying more for her student loans every month than she is for her rent. It's something like $1,400 a month, and she's not even using the degree.
And you could argue, well, the loan companies have an incentive in only making loans that people are going to be able to pay. Not true, because these loan companies, number one, are insured to a great degree, and number two, they can still make money turning over the loans to a collections agency. And then basically the collections agency can buy some of that debt off of you. So we have this false notion that the free market is going to make it so that loan companies won't get in the business of making bad loans because there's just no incentive to do it. Not true. If you're both insured and can sell the bad debt, then you're going to make bad loans that people aren't going to be able to pay. And the person that loses is going to be the person who takes the loan out.
And of course, personal responsibility does play a big role in this.
Yeah,
if
sure.
you're pursuing a degree that may not pay out as well as the money that you're investing into it from the outset, maybe you should reconsider that idea. But that doesn't excuse a company from being able to con people, right? So the approach has to be multifaceted in that sense.
And there have to be parallel incentives or equivalent incentives. When the loan company has so little to lose because they'll just sell the debt or be insured for part of the money, you don't have equivalent incentive so that everybody has the sort of equal priorities. If the loan company stood to lose as much as the person taking out the loan, if the loan doesn't get paid, then you could argue that some market forces might be positively influencing the situation.
Yeah, I'm sure the people taking out the loans, which they have the same insurance policy as those companies.
Yeah.
And remember, student loans is one of those things that don't even go away if you go bankrupt. You still have to end up paying them.
Is it student? There's one other thing. Medical debt does go away with bankruptcy.
Okay.
That's why so many people end up filing for bankruptcy because of medical debt. But I don't remember. There's something else. But yeah, student loans is the big one.
Regardless, that should not be on the list if
it should not be on the list. Yeah.
You know?
Drone-related news. Consumer drones are getting more and more popular, but there's also drone technology being used for both activities that are concerning to many, but also some really, really good things like firefighting, for example. And there have been, DJI is one of the top consumer drone companies, and they have now developed a new drone, the Matrix 200, which allows the deployment of multiple camera payloads, including zoom-capable video. Usually, a lot of these drones have very limited zoom, like a digital zoom only or something like that, as well as the ability to fight fires with drones, not by actually dropping water, right? People might be imagining it's a drone that drops water, but it's a drone that allows, by having heat, what would you call it? Like an infrared camera, I guess is the term. It can determine where there are fires or about to be fires in particularly dry areas that are getting very hot under the sun, and then quickly direct firefighting resources there before the fire gets really big.
Right, so it has a lot to do with like national parks and these super dry areas, maybe places like California. But as you said, I was imagining, you know, they had some water hose kind of attached to the drone itself.
Right.
And a big stockpile of water that they were able to use and go around. And like if there was a specific house that was on fire, that they could send in the drone instead.
Yeah.
And that way they don't have to risk lives. So this isn't as direct, but I think maybe that technology could exist because if you figure we can carry bombs on these much bigger drones,
right,
unmanned aircraft vehicles, can't we do the same thing with water?
You can. The difference, though, is the drones we're talking about here are the quadcopter drones, which work more like a helicopter. They can hover. Usually, I could be wrong about this, but the military drones that launch the missiles, I think, fly like a normal plane. They can't hover.
This is much more similar then to like a commercial product that just about anyone can go and buy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's interesting. You know, what are the big concerns about drone technology? Some of them are similar to flying car technology. Elon Musk recently said he doesn't think flying cars really make sense because people aren't going to be comfortable with all these cars flying over their heads, because as soon as something goes wrong, you've got a huge car in free fall that could land on people's heads. So he thinks that it's not going to be a technological limitation on flying cars. It's going to be that it's just not going to make sense, and that something like the Hyperloop or underground high-speed travel technology will make more sense. Drones have a sort of similar issue, and the FAA has made rules about you're not allowed to fly directly over people as a sort of hobbyist drone operator. They haven't defined directly over people. What does that exactly mean?
Because even if you're in the middle of a forest or something, you don't know if someone's hiking there. You know, you'd like to think that they mean densely populated areas, so you can't go over a stadium when it's packed.
Yeah, well, stadiums specifically, you just can't fly near, I guess, with drones. But that's a good example. Yeah, so I don't know. This is all. You know how it happens with a lot of these technologies, where the legislation is lagging by years the technology and how it's actually being used. Child porn is unfortunately one of those ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, legislation takes a long time to pass, and that's why it was pretty remarkable that Trump's healthcare plan, they tried to push in like a month or so.
Yeah.
And, you know, take over, I think, a quarter of the nation's economy so quickly. Typically, these things it may take a year to pass a bill, and that's putting it lightly.
And aren't they now at least being realistic about the tax plan? I think I heard someone say from the Trump administration, we don't even think this will be done by August.
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
I think there was just a rush to get something done in Trump's first 100 days, and they didn't come up with much.
No, it's pretty embarrassing. Yeah. So as some people know, I often have flight issues when I fly to wherever I'm going. And I had issues flying back from Las Vegas. Normally, there's 2 nonstop flights a day from Las Vegas to Boston. And I try to get on those nonstops, ideally every time I fly. But because I booked my tickets a little bit later this time, the nonstops were booked. So on the way to Las Vegas, I had a layover in Denver. And that went okay.
Oh, that's cool.
On the way back, I had a layover in St. Louis, and it just so happened we left on time. I was ready. I had a 55-minute layover in St. Louis. We got out of Las Vegas on time. I was ready. I was going to get off the plane, 20 minutes, then board the second flight, be home by 8:20 in the evening. And I'm looking at my watch on the first flight, and I'm doing math, and I'm thinking, we should kind of be descending like now. I mean, this is the time where we should be descending. And the pilot comes on and says, so, we're in a holding pattern. There's major storms in St. Louis. And I was on Wi-Fi on the plane, and I saw that there was a band of, like you have the light green, which is a little bit of rain, and you've got dark green.
Yeah.
And then it starts to get like yellow or then orange. It was the orange color, right? So it's pretty bad storms. And the pilot says, we're going to just have to circle. It's going to be about a half hour. Instantly, everybody who has an hour connection is like, worried. We're flying around in a circle for a while. Pilot comes on and says, okay, so here's the deal. we're going to be able to go around the holding pattern one more time. And if we can't land in St. Louis at that point, we're going to need to get fuel. So we're going to have to divert to Kansas City.
Right.
If that happens, it's over, right? I mean, at that
yeah.
point, who knows when I'm getting home.
The planes only carry as much jet fuel as they need. And
And
not
enough
much more.
for, like, for example, circling for a half hour or something like that. So 5 minutes go by, and then I feel that we're descending. And so the pilot comes on. He says, the worst of it has cleared St. Louis. We're going in. And I say, wow, you know what? I'll probably land right when my second flight is boarding. It's 5 gates away. I'll get on.
Yeah.
No problem.
So that's pretty stressful, though.
It is stressful.
That's maybe even more stressful than missing the flight.
But it was a fantasy world, because what I wasn't considering is that the plane that was supposed to take me to Boston was nowhere near St. Louis because of the storms. It hadn't even left. So I land and I go to the monitors. And as I look, I'm looking for the Boston flight. I get a text on my phone saying, your flight has been rescheduled from 4:50 p.m. to 7:10 p.m. So 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yep.
So at that point, I just start settling in. And you know how when you can tell that it's going to be longer than the original delay because it started lightning again and thunder and whatever. Yeah. Long story short, 7:55 ended up being the new schedule. So a 3 hour and 5 minute delay. Then we were stuck waiting for paperwork. So even though 7:55 was our departure time, because of all the back and forth and people missing the flight and people canceling or switching, they needed to pull some bags off and put bags on. Anyway, we were sitting there waiting for paperwork until about 8:20. So instead of 4:50, 8:20 was our departure time. 2 hour flight to Boston, landed about 11:25. And however, the one good thing is I didn't check the bag. I had the bag with me. So while I was still on the plane, I called a Lyft. And right after we had landed, and as I walked outside, my Lyft was pulling up, and I was able to get home. I live so close to the airport. I think I was home by like 11:40 or something like that.
Yeah, so you made up a little bit of the time there.
Yeah.
That's always one of the worst things dealing with air travel because there's just so many different things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And how are you even going to fill the time if you're at an airport? You can buy a book if you don't have, maybe do some work on your computer, but it's a really stressful thing. And
I had very little to do.
Pleasant.
No, it wasn't. And St. Louis in particular is not a great spot. I had read the 2 books I had with me. I spent hours reading before my flight to St. Louis and during the flight.
You can only read so much.
You can only read so much. I pulled out my laptop on the flight and did all the work that at that point I sort of had to do. Okay. So I just hung around. I called people. I called my girlfriend. I called my brother. I called my mom.
Tetris over and over again.
That's about it. I could have played some Tetris. Yep. But anyway, so, the important thing is I made it home safe. It could always be worse. The plane could have crashed and I could have died. So compared to that, a 3 hour and whatever minute delay isn't that bad.
Count your blessings, I guess.
Yes, exactly. It could always be worse. And I don't know. I'm trying to look at the bright side here.
We're glad to have you back, though, because, it's been a long time since both of us were in the studio. I think a whole week since the last time. And even before that, we had the vacation and everything else.
Right.
So for that reason alone, they had to get you back to Boston. I'm sure that would take priority in terms of, the pilot.
I told them, I was like, don't you realize I have to do the show on Monday? Of course, it was Saturday, and they have no idea what I'm talking about, so it didn't get me too far.
And they responded with, oh, yeah, you've been remote for a long time. You got to get back to the studio.
They knew that I had been Skyping into the show for a while, and so they got an extra plane for me.
Good.
Anyway, I made it home, and, that's about it.
I'm happy.
All right, that's it for today. I am here this week, all week, so we will talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.